Hello, everyone. Let's tune into this upcoming Mercury retrograde. Mercury goes retrograde here in the US on Wednesday. That would be the 28th of December at 24 degrees Capricorn. What's going to happen during this retrograde? Mercury is going to retrograde to the earlier degrees of Capricorn and within days form an inconjunct 150-degree aspect to Mars in Gemini, just as Mars is stationing direct after several months of having been retrograde. And of course, Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. So we have a very potent, very specific theme emerging right now. Let's tune into that. First, let's review the core meaning of Mercury in Capricorn and its retrograde motion. So Mercury always corresponds to the information, the data that we're collecting, osmosing, integrating, sharing. We're always building upon and adding to the existing intellectual framework that we have of reality. The more information we take in, the more perspective we're going to add to what we already have in our minds. And we can always add more. There's always more to learn. And so we can say with Mercury, we're always expanding upon our intellectual understanding of reality, ever approaching a more holistic understanding. We never get there because there's always more to take apart. There's always more research. We can always learn more about anything, which is fascinating. And so the purpose of Mercury isn't so much the arrival at fixed ultimate conclusions about reality. You can't get there with Mercury. It's the learning journey itself, and it's the sharing of knowledge and information. And as we all do that, as we all participate with life in the learning and the communication and the sharing, we're all helping our own understanding evolve. We're growing to understand more about who we are and what this life is all about. Thus, with Mercury, the questions we ask, the investigations, the things that we're wanting to know more about, at the core point back to what is it we're seeking to understand. There's an edge of research and inquiry for each one of us. Even if it seems superficial, it's all relevant to our ongoing soul growth. And of course, we can always relate to the Mercury function in a more superficial way, just constant mental stimulation. But there's a sort of agency and engaged, empowered way of being with Mercury, which is an engaged, thoughtful inquiry. I'm wanting to learn something, and we can feel that we're actually putting pieces of information together. We're building a more comprehensive understanding of reality, whatever the topic might be. And it feels interesting. We're wanting to know, we're wanting to learn, we're wanting to engage. Very often, the Mercury journey will start off superficially in the sense that we're not going very deep in a topic. We might be skimming several areas, but these areas will give us little bits of information that will be just enough to sort of catapult us into a deeper investigation and research. It's kind of like from the outside in, starting with the peripheral, starting with the external, more accessible realms of information and data, and taking that as a gateway to go in more deeply. And we could even say with astrology, we might be learning astrology through a general gradual osmosis with videos and conversations. And then the Mercury function, when we really engage it, it starts to want to really understand the connection, right? Okay, Mercury, I get it. Capricorn relates to structure, to time, to space, to the crystallization of consciousness within form. So how do we apply Mercury in Capricorn? Like that itself is a Mercury process. And we're actually going to engage. We're going to work with the different logical frameworks that we have. But then at some point, always with Mercury, always, we let go of the purely logical, compartmentalized approach to life. And we shift into a more intuitive right brain Jupiter integration synthesis. Right? The Jupiter function, which is sort of the polarity to the Mercury function, is how we intuitively assimilate all of the information to make meaning out of it. So it's very important that we're always working with the two together. Without the Jupiter function, it's just lost in the mind, but there's no integration of anything. So working with Mercury and Capricorn, we're specifically looking at how our learning, two dimensions, both how our learning and the growth of our own understanding and our own minds is necessary in order to cooperate in social existence. Now, we have to know how to speak the human language, Mercury and Capricorn. If you're, if did I say human language? You have to know how to talk to humans. You have to know how to speak whatever language, in this case, English, is the language of your particular society or culture or nation, Capricorn. There's a need to be able to read the signs, to follow the rules, to communicate in a way that is accessible and practical and relevant to the particular culture and times that we're living within. Okay, so on one level of understanding, Mercury and Capricorn is a focused, conditioned way of working with the mind so that we can all interact and cooperate with social reality relative to the particular place and time that we've incarnated. Or if you time travel, well, let's say someone time travels from the 1400s and they just plop in here now. From a Mercury and Capricorn perspective, they can speak, they have the Mercury function, but the Capricorn present moment, time and space reality, they're not going to be able to understand any of the logical parameters that we're using. The phrases, the ideas, Marshall McLuhan always speaks about this idea that the particular technological era that we're in is so encompassing, we don't realize that we're in it until we've evolved to a new phase, right? Think of our iPhones, our computers, how we communicate, how we travel, how we use maps. Very different than how we used maps 20 years ago. We don't think about it because we're in it. It's the ocean within which we are swimming. It's so encompassing. We only become aware of it when we step outside of it and we observe it from a point in time that we are no longer within. So thus, the other dimension for Mercury and Capricorn, as it relates to our conditioning, are going to be the various assumptions, rules, constructs that we've just internalized so deeply we don't even question them. And this will include our idea of, for example, you go to college, you're going to go to a career day, and they're going to give you all kinds of information about the different kinds of careers and options, and if you want to go this path or this path or this path. And of course, that's a very narrow stream of thinking, very, very narrow stream relative to all the kinds of possibilities that exist. In fact, even career is just one form. It relates to the sort of social, maybe patriarchal, existing cultural capitalistic idea that, in a sense, to live here, you need to work and earn money. And so our knowledge, our training, our education from a Capricorn perspective is usually going to be inherently linked with some kind of functional work in the world that is necessary for our existence here as a human being in society. And so to be able to recognize our conditioning, to rethink it, question it, is this really livable? Is this really what I'm drawn to? Or am I just following the route? Am I following the words, the ideas, the information, the ways to think that I've been taught, or the ways to think that I've been so familiar with? And so to deepen in this, each one of us in our own life, we all have the questions that we've been asking. The questions we've been asking and the thoughts that we've been having and the conversations we've been having. From a Capricornian point of view, we can think of all of it as existing within the framework of what we are familiar with. We're all familiar with the thoughts that we've been thinking for a while. Very few of us, very seldomly, do we generally find ourselves structuring a different kind of reality where we're sincerely, genuinely interested in an entirely new way of thinking, building an entirely new logical framework to perceive and think about and talk about our life. In general, that kind of shift takes place really slowly. Again, the gradual process with Mercury, we're going to encounter something new. Oh, this is interesting. I've been interested in this, and we'll listen, we'll talk about it, we'll engage. And it becomes an osmosis process. And this Mercury is happening to Pluto. It's next to Pluto, right? So there is a sense of we are wanting to go deeply into this. But that's in general the process that happens, a gradual process of shaping a new way of thinking. Mercury moving retrograde in Capricorn deeply invites us to question the assumptions, the thoughts, the logical parameters that we've been moving with, thinking about, cycling in our mind over and over and over again, and to ask the essential question, what's helpful? What's really working? Is there another way to think of this? What we encounter in that inquiry is all the stress and the challenge and the fear of breaking the status quo. The greatest insecurity relative to Capricorn is the internal judgment and shame and pressure, inner repression that's been established as a result of saying, I got to be this. I have to be this. I have to fit into this box. I have to look this way. There's an internal pressure that says, if I'm not this, if I don't fit into these constructs, I'm bad, I'm wrong. Oftentimes, the extent to which that's internalized is deeper than our awareness. Thus, we have to become aware of the conditioning in order to really begin to unravel that. So becoming aware of what's not feeling joyful, what's not feeling livable, what's not functional. Capricorn in its highest expression is moving with life as a result of profound self-reflection, profound self-awareness, and over time, structuring a reality that is profoundly functional and helpful and relevant to where we want to go long term. Where do we want to go? What's our goal? And so when we put Capricorn with Mercury, what do I want to learn about? What is a new way of thinking that I want to practice and train and develop? And thus, what's not working? And this is where discipline comes in. Discipline is an absolutely necessary part of it, because without discipline, we're not going to get where we want to go. And discipline from a very wise, non-repressive, non-angry, non-shaming perspective is it requires work. We have to show up every day and practice this. And there's nothing in life that provides results without discipline, without consistent effort. And here we're wanting to restructure our thinking. So Mercury as the ruler of Gemini, Mars has been moving backwards in Gemini for a while. And this has been a powerful time of very instigating, very stimulating, powerful, essential questions, new learning, new information, shaking up the foundation of our understanding of reality, and wanting to make new choices, open up the doors to our freedom by way of seeing things in a different way and not being willing to ask questions. I think that's one of the biggest qualities of Mercury, of Mars in Gemini, not being afraid to stir things up with just the right question that will move the energy. So we're moving towards an assimilation time, a synthesis time. Mars, in the very few weeks before it moves direct, which is what's happening right now, just as Mercury is about to move retrograde and share a very tight inconjunct with Mars, which it rules, being in Gemini, this is a time for the next few weeks where there's almost like, here's the analogy, it's you're studying for a test. It's like you're cramming for a test, but not pressure, not stressful. It's just there's a sense of there's a due date. There's something that's going to open up. There's something that's wanting to be seen. It's wanting to be clarified. And so how are we in relationship to the questions that we have? How are we in relationship to the way that we're thinking about our life, the logical parameters that we have about our reality? Are we questioning it? Are we willing to take our time and consider a new way of putting it together? Are there other questions to ask that might open up new doors? Questions are what opens the doors. The answers that we get are determined by the space created by the questions that we're asking, right? It's sort of like a lock and a door and a key kind of thing. So what we're wanting to know is facilitated by the questions and the inquiries that we create in order to get there. And I would say there can feel like there is a calling to move a lot of energy right now, because we have Mars ruling Jupiter that just entered Aries, which is a very strong instigating. There is a new journey unfolding right now. It's requiring a great degree of courage and self-trust. And so with Mars moving forward, there are possibilities. And here's another perspective. If we're willing to go outside of the box of what we're familiar with, it's just a matter of really being open to communication. Communicate, share your ideas, talk to people. Be a little more fluid during this Mercury retrograde to just freely express yourself, try things, experiment with things. If you're beginning to work on something, after this retrograde, we're going to find a lot of energy opening up for it. But it could be that for this to really open up, we need to allow ourselves to explore new perspectives, new possibilities, and open up for new pathways. And the Mercury retrograde journey in general will always reveal new pathways that are beyond our understanding, right? It's not something we're going to think of and create on our own. It often just happens through the flow of conversation, communication, and just the natural unfolding. It's like life is a big, giant conversation, and one thought elicits the next thought. And so this will really give rise to a sense of strength and courage and stamina and energy. I would say holding the intention that we're cultivating the grounds to feel a lot of excitement and passion and energy for this new phase. And this new phase is going to be very powerful. Let's share the chart for a moment so I can actually show you the movement of these planets. So here we have Mercury moving direct retrograde right here in the 10th house. And let's go all the way to when Mercury is about to go retrograde. So here, go direct. So here it goes direct on January 18th. A few days prior, Mars went direct as well. And Mercury is also squaring Chiron and Jupiter and Juno in Aries. Okay, powerful. This is, you got to move, you got to make choices, and it might be uncomfortable. And Mercury direct, what have you learned? What do you need to do to materialize it? In conjunct to Mars and Gemini, you got a lot of energy. Maybe you don't see the whole picture, but just get started and move with it. Don't be afraid to make choices. So my perspective, my advice for this moment right now is, over the next few weeks, this isn't about precipitous action. Don't force things. It's like, if you're not in the vortex, don't do it. Like, don't push yourself beyond, even if it seems like you're supposed to, Capricorn, right? Like, I'm supposed to do this. Just flow with it, right? Flow with what's evident, with what's alive, with where the energy is. Something very accessible and more concrete wants to open up around mid-January or so. It should be very interesting to see how that unfolds for all of us. A reminder that we have 2 programs coming up. The 2023 year-long training program, it begins with the Essentials course, or you can do the full year training program. We're beginning in the middle of February. Learn more about that in the description below. And only for those that are already studied and familiar and practice with the work of evolutionary astrology as taught by Jeffrey Wolf Green, I have a new student practice course that also begins mid-February. It's available for those who have taken the training program with me, or those that are already trained in practice and want to join in this very focused, very wonderful, guided learning practice container. So learn more about both of those in the description below. Thank you for watching.